welcome everyone. This is the School District of Prescott Board of Education regular meeting. Call the meeting to order, subject to Section 1983 Wisconsin statutes. Our first item is to adopt the agenda. Rick, is there any changes you want to?
There's no specific changes. I did want to make sure a clarification for the board. There was a late add. We do have a consent item, item 5. It's the boys golf team that is seeking approval for an overnight. And it's the identical trip that the girls have made. There was a slide added. It was duly posted on the website and also in our 2 public locations. But if you wanted to move it out, if you needed more time, otherwise it's in consent.
All right, any questions? Otherwise we can motion.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented. With the addition of the golf trip. There you go. Number 5.
Yep.
Second?
All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries. All right, we're going to move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Helen, would you care to lead us?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We got the recognition of visitors and rules for public comments. Please approach the podium one at a time, okay? Stating your name, municipality, and topic you'd like to address. A lot of time is 3 minutes per individual, 6 if you're representing a group that's present. Comments should be directed to the board and not to other staff or other participants. The board will not act on any comments that are made during the meeting. Presiding officer may direct a district administrator to follow up with that individual at a later date, and public comment section will be limited to 30 minutes unless board action is taken. Anybody care to be recognized at this time? All right, we're going to move on
3 times.
We will move on to item 5, good news.
And we're going to start with our student rep, Katie.
So the Prescott girls dance team took first place at state this year for pom and jazz. It is their 2nd year in a row winning jazz and their first time winning pom in 14 years. The boys and girls basketball team both had successful seasons, with their track record being 17-9 for boys and then 12-13 for girls. With the spring season arriving, baseball, softball, boys golf, and track and field are starting to begin. Speech is wrapping up as many participants have already competed to qualify for state. Prom will be taking place on April 26th, with the prom tickets already available to purchase on GoFan. And then tomorrow, high school students will be helping out at Courage Retreat that is occurring at the Prescott Middle School. And that's all.
All right, thank you. Rick?
All right, just wanted to let everybody know that next week is spring break, so our students and faculty will be off. Everybody enjoy some nice restful relaxation, and we'll come back for the final in March on the 24th. Did want to let everybody know that we did have a snow day in March. We did have contestants that we had shots around the Prescott community. We have 3 winners that are up on the screen, and we just wanted to congratulate Gabriella Tulip, Calvin Milren, and Aaron, is it Glod or Glode? So I apologize if but we had Funniest Creation, Best Snow Sculpture, and Best Classic Snowman. Kudos to Principal Kozmowski and Andrea Herzon for kind of pulling that together. In addition, just kind of nice notes for Mike Koika and facilities, and working with Markin and Johnson and our middle school renovation. The new flooring for the wrestling room and weight room has been completely installed. The wall has been removed and is now going to be a flexible space for lifetime fitness and additional programming for our students for physical education. We also had an outstanding crowd at Malone Elementary and our intermediate school, where our K-5 students got to participate at lunch and have lunch with their grandparents. Our parking and the rooms were overfilled, and I just wanted to shout out to Nicole Lenzner and our principals and custodians for setting all that up and the breakdown. So with that, we begin school business.
All right, thanks, Rick. First item on school business is the consent agenda. We have the February 19th, 2025 regular board meeting minutes, March 3rd, 2025 special board meeting minutes, and March 8th, 2025 special board meeting minutes. We have finance reports, personnel report for non-licensed staff, approve CISA 11 annual contracted services, and the addition of the, let's see here, how do we read this? PHS Boys Golf seeking approval for overnight trip. That's everything in consent. Is there anything that anybody wants to pull out of consent agenda? No? Then I will adopt the consent agenda. Any objections? All right, no objections. The consent agenda is adopted. Thank you. Move on to item B, consider a second reading of Neola School Board policies.
So as you know, last month we went through, I think it was 51 policies. Makes people's eyes kind of glaze over, but it is kind of the foundation of how we operate. There were 3 successive policies, and I wanted to just read the numbers. It was 1130, ethics and conflict of interest. Understand that that is for ethics and conflict of interest at the administrative level, principals and superintendent. Then there was 3230, that is specifically for our licensed staff, and then 4230, which is conflict of interest and ethics for our support staff. At that time, there was some discussion. We wanted to, Pat Block, who's not here tonight, had asked for some clarification because it also included supervisory for relatives or supervision of relatives. And sometimes in a small district, that can be challenging, also in our athletics and PCR. And so we wanted to add clarity. So I wanted to just start, and we have the colored version up there. Wanted to make sure that everybody, the board, you were able to review it. Nothing has changed other than the areas that were called out last time. And this is for the first one, which is 1130. The one thing that we did want to call to your attention is that no administrative employee may accept or engage in employment consulting, advising, or other professional activities with any organization other than the district, and whether the administrator will receive compensation or not without first. And what we did present last time is that they have to receive approval of the district administrator. And then if there's approval and it doesn't interfere with their job. The challenge then became, what if it's the administrator? And at that time, we decided to add it that the administrator would ask or grant permission from the board, okay? Otherwise, there is really nothing else in this one with regards to the ethics and conflict. Then we go to licensed staff. We worked on the wording, and at this time, it is being recommended for the board to kind of look at 2 separate options. What we have is on item B is that licensed employees, officers, or agents shall not directly supervise a relative who is a licensed staff member employed by the district or employee in a position contracted by the district. Option 1 is unless it got approved by, so a licensed staff could just notify the district administrator and get written approval, or we would say that exceptions can be made for extracurricular and athletics when an alternative option is not available. So whether or not you want one or both of those, that is there for your discussion. Any feedback? So those are options that we would try to, how do you address a licensed staff member who might be in a position where they are supervising another licensed staff member? And do you prefer one option over the other? Or a hybrid?
Tiny, do you have any?
I guess I kind of prefer one, where we just get approval for 2. It says when there cannot when there's no other options, basically, and I don't think that's always the case.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes that's just the best option, but there are other options available, you know? So I guess I would just stick with one.
Yeah, and it's black and white, so like it's pretty straightforward. There's no interpretation. Any other comments? So we'll go with option one there, Rick.
All right. And saved. Then just a reminder, at the bottom, it said admin team was not recommending that portion at the bottom because it was redundant. And then, now we're going to go probably to the easiest one, because this is with regards to conflict of interest for support staff. In this case, again, it's option A or B. If you're okay with us just marking that unless the district administrator provides explicit written.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is saved. All right. That covers those three. Then underneath that, we had another one with regards to administration of non-prescription drugs. At that time, there were some good positive feedback, specifically around athletics. We kind of know within the school day that students are not able to have over-the-counter medications. There were some concerns about whether or not that was being held consistent through our athletics. I did meet with Mr. Smith, for our activities director, and Amy Kraus, who's our registered nurse. They've all agreed on this practice. We did provide you with kind of the protocols, so there are kind of administrative protocols that go with these policies. We do have a health protocol form where parents have to sign that there are medications either from a doctor or over the counter. There is also, our nurse is overseen by a medical director, and we have an agreement with that medical director, so our RN is always in response and overseen and supervised by that medical director, and it speaks to that. And then we also provided to the board a copy of kind of administrative protocol that basically talks about that the over-the-counter medications would be given either to their coach, who then turns it over to the trainers, depending on which sport and how let's just say baseball is a little bit more constrained about the field of play compared to track and field, where you have a lot of the kids dispersed and they have different coaches. So the idea would be is that it's a supervising adult that maintains the icy hot, the Advil and things like that, and that they would provide. How this policy also came forward was that we talked about asthma being a health condition, and we wanted to be able to have on-site products to be able to give the asthma medication. But otherwise, those were the two main areas that we talked about, and otherwise there are no additional changes. Feedback or comments?
Anything down here, you guys? Feedback? No? Tanya, any feedback on your end?
Not really, it just sounds like basically if athletes were to have it, we'd fill out a form with the over-counter medication, stuff like that, so,
Yep.
yeah.
And to that end, we already have our athletic and student code handbooks. Those handbooks get updated for the fall. Both the secondary principals, Mr. Igo and Josh Figge, have been updated. Then when we have our coaches meetings, to the degree that we can start getting this implemented for, if it's approved tonight, this would be something that the coaches would be talking to the athletes for spring. And then all the code books and websites would be updated for the 25-26 school year.
All right.
Then the last one was, Vicki, you had shared some good feedback for us that we brought back, and that was specifically about our use of district-issued emails to our students. And then there was a clause in there that they can't use that email, a district email, that's for educational purposes to sign up for a third party. Part of the reason that we do that is that those third party often say that you have to be 13 years of age, and we have students with email addresses that are below 13. We do block when they're on our internet and things like that, or Chromebooks have the screening. But there are also times where our teachers are using, we do have the YouTube channel, both for athletics and for our music. So how we changed it is that, that it is including those examples, but not limited to, and that any third-party service cannot be added without the authorized letter from their principal.
Any questions or comments on this one? Anyone? No?
Nope.
All right, that covers all the policies here. No, so we did technically make an edit for the first three. So that should probably be included in the motion here.
Yeah, that you selected option A.
Yep.
Yeah. And that was marked as we were speaking.
Anybody want to take a run at this one?
Sure. I move to accept the second reading of the above noted policy version 34.1 and include edits for the first three to choose option A.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Item C, consider personnel reports for licensed staff.
We are 2 months back to back with no new hires, no resignations, no retirements.
We will move on to item D. There will be no motion there.
We are on D.
We're on item D, closeout of the 2022 Markin & Johnson Full View Outstanding Bond Referendum Project.
So I'm going to welcome back Mike. We have you coming up, and I'm going to ask both Rick Montreal and Kyle Igo to kind of join Mike. This is an area where we wanted to kind of share as we close out the 3-year working agreement with Markin & Johnson for the bond referendum. Mike's going to kind of quickly cover what's happening around the district. I kind of shared this in my introduction comments about the middle school weight room and wrestling room and that floor being done, and that looks outstanding. But Mike's going to share with you a little bit about the projects that are going to be done next week when the kids aren't in the buildings, and some summer projects. And then because of some favorable outcomes financially, we have one last ask, a big ticket item that we wanted to present to you.
All right. So some projects that we're going to do over spring break at the elementary. We have some cabinet heaters that we're going to finish up on the heating and cooling system over there. That should complete everything in that building. And then also at spring break down at the 125 Elm, the intermediate school, we're going to be replacing the stratification fans in the gym down there. That was a project that we kind of put on hold, see where we were with funds, so now we're going to replace those ceiling fans. That's what's going on next week. A couple other items we're looking at for this summer at the elementary. We're looking at replacing some faucets and shut-off valves in 63 classrooms under the sink so we can shut the water off properly and maintain the faucets as need be. Another project at 125 Elm will be the exhaust fans for the bathrooms down there in the lobby. Replace that, the exhaust fan there. And then at the 1220 St. Croix Street, this summer we're also doing the grease trap in the kitchen and some also additional drain pipes that we found were deteriorated during the school year. So we're going to be taking care of that. And that's kind of it for those projects. The other things we're kind of looking at, I guess is there's some bathroom partitions at that building too, lower level, and then the locker rooms, and then all the bathroom partitions will be the kind of a plastic, newer style. Those are the last of the metal ones from some were original from when the high school was originally built. So that's kind of about it for those projects. Those are kind of already in the makes and going. On that sheet, you can see a lot of them are still price has already been included, what we have already done, so.
And so from that, what we were able to learn is the money's been encumbered. By June 13th, we have to close out the way the bonds are currently being held. And so we were starting to do the reconciliations. There's things, some of the rebates that come in because of high efficiency boilers, air handler units or LED. Those have kind of come in and been booked. There were some owner savings or contingency that hadn't been used. And so as we were looking at that and finalizing Fund 49, we were looking at how much money we had left. And it looks as if, again, it's a moving target because you have money coming in and out at the same time, but we have somewhere north of $250,000 to $300,000 left. As we were getting close to the closeout, Mike went through a conference call with Markin and Johnson and River Valley Architects with me, and Kara, our finance person. We've done a good rundown with PMA and the bonds and where they stand. We're very confident about where we are financially. I did ask the admin team starting when we came back from winter break about any major projects that they saw. Again, this only includes the 3 older buildings, not the high school, and put anything in to prioritize. Then I asked Mike to start looking at his long-term plans. And so are there anything that we have not done or that the finance, I'm sorry, not the finance, but the Facility Advisory Committee. What we learned, and I'll just ask Mike, can you share with us what was one of the items that was pretty far down on the list, but you see as maybe a high need for being replaced?
Yeah, we're talking the bleachers, and we had that on our long-range plan back in 2009 already, so it's been out there for a while. We've done some maintenance and we've done some upgrades, but those are the original bleachers from the high school. Was built in 1969. They are way past their life expectancy, very hard to get parts for, even trying to find somebody to work on them.
And how do you set those up? How do the custodians pull those in and out?
Well, there's a cord you plug into them, there's an electric motor, very similar to even the new ones, and then the drive. But the drive has been custom made for our bleachers, so there's not like parts readily available. So if something fails, you have to go try and make it up and wire it ourselves and stuff like that, so.
And when I look at the 2 gentlemen behind you, the 3 of us have been called many times where the power has failed or that drive has failed and we weren't able to get the bleachers out.
Yeah, it takes quite a few people to pull them out manually because of the weight, and then you also have the drag of the motor and the wheels, so.
Yeah. And they're not ADA compliant?
No,
Technically.
Technically, no. Yeah. We have modified some spots for people with handicaps and wheelchair, but they're truly not an ADA compliant bleacher, so.
So what I'm going to put up is that I did ask so that we could kind of start to look at how close in cost this would be. What is the timeline for being able to, what projects, if this was to go forward, what the timeline would look like and what the cost would be. Mike, is there anything on Fund 46, which is your capital long-term plan, that is equivalent or something that is imminent that needs to be worked on?
No, going back through the whole facilities committee list and the long-range plan that we had, we upgraded it that somewhere over the first of the year, that a lot of those things that were on there, all the high priority stuff got taken care of, medium priority, all that stuff got taken care of. There's probably a few little things out there that were low priority, but we can handle in our regular budget. This bleacher was one of the items when the facilities committee met and discussed everything, was on there. And it was kind of in that, where do you really place it with everything that's out there? So it kind of got put from like the medium to low type thing. Had it out there in the beginning when we were working with River Valley and all the pricing and whatever, and bids when they first kind of come in, we kind of thought we were, okay, maybe not going to be able to get everything, so we kind of cut that out. Well, now we're sitting here, we have funds yet available. I feel it's a very good time to take care of this, being we have the funds. It's something we planned for. Have been on the long-range plan for quite a while. It's something that I feel if we don't take care of it now, we will be looking at this in the next 2 to 3 years from now. So.
All right. Thanks. Questions from the board? I did put up, we had 2 estimates, and really what we're looking for is kind of basically the parameters, right? You can see that the estimate on the left was Markin & Johnson. They were able to identify the cost for 4 bleachers. There is also a proposal where there would be 1 long standard on each side. That also then kicks in to determine if we have 1 long standard, you would need to redo the curtain. The curtain is like a shower curtain, goes left to right, and it's tucked behind. And I'll let Matt Smith talk about the curtain in addition. Then we had another bid that we went after and asked the company that helped us with the opening of this gymnasium for the high school. A couple things that we wanted to note is that with Markin & Johnson, either way, Mike and I have talked, and it's a big enough project that the demolition, the electrical work, and also making sure that it's commissioned, that we would prefer to have Markin & Johnson oversee the project either way. Mainly because of just the timing is likely going to be in fall when the schools are opening, and if anything goes wrong, you have a fallback of a bigger company that can go after it.
And another thing with bleachers, they also need, it's just not, you just don't go order a bleacher and design them and put them in. They are designed for your facility. They do have to go to the state for state approval before we can put them in. So that's another reason to work with an architect, Markin & Johnson, to make sure everything is done right and can be done properly. And I think the most efficient way is staying with the general contractor on this one.
Any questions?
I'll start it down here. Vicki, do you have any questions for Mike on anything?
So the bid from Markin & Johnson includes the demo, disposal, all of that sort of stuff?
Yep.
And then the other company, we'd have to furnish?
The other company would only be installing the bleachers. We'd have to take care of either hiring a demo company to come in and do it and pay for dumpsters to haul the stuff away.
Okay.
Whereas Markin & Johnson, that is included in their price, so.
That's what I thought when I was looking through
Yep.
this, but I just wanted to make sure that that's really...
They also have electrical allowance that's in there because the new bleachers, obviously, the disconnects that are there are not going to match up to the new ones, so
Yep.
that has to be done. And then if we go a 3-phase electrical, which the motors will last longer and use less power, we're going to have to update that electrical service for them, so.
Okay. That's all I had.
All right, Helen?
I don't have any questions. I think you kind of hit it on the head, the one I had, so.
Katie, any questions on bleachers at the middle school?
I mean, not right now, but maybe later.
All right. Tanya?
I really don't have questions. I looked back on, before you moved to the Google format of our long-term planning, and it was on there, like you said, and it was projected to need to be replaced in, I think, 2019. So it was a handful of years ago. It's been on that wait list for a while, and if we have some of that referendum dollar and it aligns with that project, I think it makes sense, so.
Yeah, I'm on board 100% here. I just got a couple of questions, Mike. With the curtain, so let's talk about the bleachers first, because I see the bid has the 4 sections.
Yep.
We got a bid for a 2-section too, right? Did we get one that was a straight across that wasn't into 4
Yeah.
sections?
Yeah. That's, the price is equivalent, well, it's equivalent when you get right down to it.
Because
Because of
what
the
happens when you do the one section, it can be slightly cheaper, but it necessitates a new curtain.
Completely
Yeah.
changing
And so
that
we did
curtain.
put
Yep.
a curtain, and under the total, what's highlighted in green and yellow, it says alt bid including a curtain. So that curtain
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about.
gets added. And
Yep.
so that kind of, you deduct on maybe the bleachers, but you add back on the curtain. Although I want to have Matt ask the
Curtain's
question.
as old as the building too.
Something
though.
also
Yeah.
with the bleachers, the four section is that you can bring out just part of this section, just part of this section, just part of this section. If you go with a long one, you have to bring out, even though you might only need 3 benches over here, you're gonna bring out 3 benches the full length.
Full length.
So
Yep.
That makes sense.
So
that would be my,
logically, two sections is better than one then.
saying similar to what you have there.
Okay.
So,
Okay, and then the other question I had was, it's a middle school. How often do we use bleachers on both sides? Is it, we talked about this where if every, the games, the events, oftentimes we're just pulling out on one side. I bring it up because it's a cost, right? So like, how often do we need them? Is it down the road, what do you see the benefit of having the
And
other side?
I'll have Mr. Igo jump in too
well,
on that.
as far as just doing one side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
Well,
want
and
to
Mike,
speak to it, I can speak to
both
it,
of you
too.
can, but I
Okay.
also for school and athletics.
So right now, like per this year so far, I think we've pulled out both sides for assemblies. And not all the way. We've pulled the section nearest the cafeteria out on both sides, pulled the curtain, and then we have some assemblies that we then use both sides of the bleachers that way. So we've done that a handful of times. As far as athletics, yep, we probably don't fill both sides at either a middle school event or some of our C-team events that we've had there. But the idea would be if you put all brand-new bleachers in, we have another spot that can host something of up to 1,000 people. So it would give us, if the high school is booked or the high school is set up for something else, we can now book and have something in that gym, whatever it might be. The other thing is plan for the future. And as we plan for the future, we don't really know what that holds. We've had discussions about, is it going to add a grade level? Will we add 2 grade levels? Then as we're talking about that, are we talking about elementary concerts? 2 years ago, they had the elementary concerts there where they used both sides, they used chairs on the floor. And so like predictability of what we're gonna use it for in 5 years, I don't know that, but that would be the reason and rationale that I would advocate that we're gonna go 2 sides. And whether it's one long one on each side or 4 sections, 2 sections on each side, indifferent on that. But that's why I would advocate to do the whole thing at one time.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense when you're thinking potentially having 5 grades in there, right?
Yes. And the other one is the curtain. They're in there doing the work now. That curtain, I don't know how much life our current curtain has on it.
Yeah, it's been around for a while.
We're gonna have the people there a chance to get
Yep.
a new curtain that operates, it's motorized, unlike the pole, which leaves.
Yeah, it's a drop down instead of a pole.
Yep.
It gives us more variability in
Yep.
use with that.
Yep.
And the one that we're gonna look at is gonna be similar to the one here at the high school, that it's gonna roll up and down, it won't fold up. The ceiling height is 25 feet, so it's not quite as high as this ceiling, so you need one that gets up a little bit tighter. The roll-up one will drop down to about the spot where the rail is for the current pole curtain. So the height isn't going to be affected where you see some of those that they fold up or they mash up a little bit and then they hang a couple of feet from the ceiling. Those are a little cheaper curtains, but with our ceiling height, again, volleyball and those things, we want to stay as tight to the ceiling as we can.
Right. Yeah, that all makes sense, guys, and I appreciate you kind of laying that out and explaining it.
And
So,
Mike, I just wanted your perspective too. Regardless if we went one side or 2, we were going to recommend that both sides be demolished and taken out.
Yep.
Right? We have,
Right.
right. So then the other issue, I think, as Kyle just identified, is plan for the future. You don't know if you're going to have one grade or two, but we have used, and if you want to have a student assembly and you have 4 grades or 5, it kind of makes sense. If you have an event, the Performing Arts Center has been nice, but it is, I think the capacity, Matt, is about 560.
It's, I think, 567, so if the high school is booked and we have more than 600 people, we have nothing. So by doing both sides there, we can accommodate, 700, 800, 900 people, which gives us that flexibility for the community also.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense, guys, thanks.
And also doing both sides. So if you're going to do it one side now and one down the road, you might not be able to match that style or that color, so.
Then the cost is going to be monumental.
Well, yeah.
The logistics of all the work crew getting on site is a
Yeah.
cost too, so.
All right, yeah, thanks, I appreciate it, guys, that makes a lot of sense.
So
So.
the idea of possibly like booking or being able to do 2 events, would that be like being able to host 2 different tournaments at one time? So you could have wrestling and basketball going on at the same time, that sort of?
Yes, with the layout we're proposing, we're able to, we could have something going on up here and then
Yep.
something still big going on at the middle school. too.
Okay.
So it gives us variability, it gives us flexibility with that extra space.
Have we had times where you went, oh man, if we only had?
We just turned down an event 2 weeks ago that we just didn't have the space to do
Okay.
multi-events, so yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that's money we could be bringing in then.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to let you know, the timelines, why is it on the board, right? It's that we have to close out the money by June.
Yep.
There's no other competing projects. If you make the decision tonight, the timeline at best they're looking at is September installation. That's why you're already starting to be in during when volleyball starts and PE. So again, that's why it's on here tonight. What we're hoping is that it'd be more about the parameters, unless the board really wants to get into whether or not it's 2 sections or 4, whether or not the curtain goes wall to wall or just from the front of the stands when they're pulled out. If you're willing, the goal would be is that we would stay obviously within the money that the bond referendum has presented. When Karen and I have looked at best case scenarios and worst case scenarios, I think the worst case scenario is we might be off by $5,000. And as soon as I know that, I would come back to the board to make sure that you knew. We would figure out where that came from. But at this point, we're hoping that as long as we stay within that, below the $300,000 threshold, that we would commission these guys to work with Markin & Johnson and have the final specs done, and what is in the best fiscal and both for flexibility, whether or not it's 1 set of stands or 2. If you're willing to give us that leeway.
Yeah, you guys explained it perfectly to me, so I'm good with whatever you go with.
Okay.
And then I know the motion has kind of with or without the curtain, but as a board, are we comfortable with the curtain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that's an issue. And Rick, if it is over, by a small amount of money, that could come out of Fund 46, right?
Yes.
Okay. Not Fund 10. It wouldn't have to come from Fund 10. It could come from Fund 46.
Yes, you have options.
All right. I don't think we could have spent our money any better. My gosh, we stretched out every dollar, got every project done that was on our list, Mike.
Yeah.
This is fantastic,
It
actually.
was quite a list.
Yeah.
Wow, really, really great job. And thank you to the voters of the community for supporting this referendum 3 years ago, because it really puts our buildings in a great spot. All right, anybody want to make a motion here?
I move to approve closing out 2022 Markin & Johnson bond referendum projects to include the removal of the original wood bleachers at 1220 St. Croix Street and purchase a new replacement set of middle school bleachers
With
with a new curtain.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We're going to move on. Consider approval of 4K agreements.
So I want to just thank our business partners from New Adventures, Hearts, Hands, and Mind, and St. Joe's. Also, the work that Sarah has done in order to kind of look at the original articles that predated me. And one of the things that came up early on when we were looking at April and just trying to figure out what the financing was, we noticed that some of the articles no longer provide things that it references a council. It referenced curriculum that are no longer used. So we are working with Weld Riley to update the contract. All three business partners reviewed the contract. We met early, I think, February. We went through, made the edits. We just came back and met again. We have made some kind of concessions and agreements. One of the most challenging things that as a district we've been faced with is just declining enrollment. For our K-12 teachers, principals, and our programs, we've had to make some reductions in just sections and things like that. We did have conversations with regards to that the population probably fits 4 sections versus 6. We went back and forth on how that is currently staffed, making sure that our ratios stay within state limits, but it is 13-1 or 2-26, and how we distribute the students. We're all in agreement with regards to continuing the partnership, updating and making sure that we hit the instructional minutes. At this time, it still will remain Monday through Thursday. There is some talk about whether or not we'd ever shift to a Tuesday, Friday, but at this point, we didn't think it was something without a lot of parent input or survey that we would be adjusting any of those timeframes. In addition, we did talk about that we do have an exit clause and termination clause. It was somewhat convoluted and hard to interpret, and when any contract can be interpreted in more than one way, anybody can interpret it, and so if our business partners wanted to interpret one way and we wanted to interpret the other, given that we were the writers of it, it would be in their favor. So we did talk to them about that. The exit strategy, obviously, for any improper or egregious act on either side, that's standard practice, and we all agreed. In addition, we talked about having a renewal clause, and it was a little bit vague. It said that every January we had to renew, otherwise it terminated. But the question was, if you didn't say it, it got convoluted with regards to kind of like teacher renewal. So what we have agreed is that we would, in no later than January 15th, we would inform in writing that we're continuing and that it was ongoing. And if it's not done, that it would be canceled. The goal is, in order for anybody to repurpose their rooms, work with staffing, similar the decisions that we make every April and May, they would need some runway space as well to prepare for September. Now, since we just met, Weld Riley was unable to give back the updated contract, but what we did agree in principle are the things that I'm just covering, that it would still be a 4-day-a-week program with the outreach. We'd meet the instructional minutes to be reimbursed at 0.6. The per pupil funding, we showed you the funding over the last 3 years. It has been the same at $2,885 per child. It does predate the previous 6 years, has been identical. As you know, Prescott Public Schools has not received increases in per pupil aid for 6 of the 8 years. At this time, we are one of the highest districts for reimbursing. We had 5 comparable districts. The only district that paid more per pupil was a district that ran a program 5 days a week. So we did inform at this time that we would be moving forward with the same per pupil funding at $28.85, and that would be on an annual basis revisited. And so to kind of reiterate, we would still have a partnership with St. Joe's, Hearts, Hands, and Minds, and New Adventures. It would be Monday through Thursday with the Friday outreach. The per pupil funding would be $2,885 for the 25-26. Obviously, we continue to provide curriculum resources, and transportation. The final contract language is pending, but we were, for them who have to make staffing decisions and also have boards that they have to get approval from, having an agreement conceptually was important, and so I'm bringing that forward to you to basically signal that we are moving forward with an agreement with a final contract to be executed with myself and the 3 centers.
Helen, do you have any questions here?
No, I don't. It's pretty straightforward.
All right. Katie, do you have any questions about 4K?
Nope.
Vicky?
No, I don't have any questions.
Tanya?
Rick, can you just clarify? I know that there are 6 sections right now run. How many sections are we running next year?
They've agreed that they would like to still run 6.
Okay.
But they understood that if they run 6, they have to fit the 1 to 13 or staffing ratio. At this time, they are able to meet that. Because of how they're set up, they do have aides or childcare individuals in the centers. And if for some reason we ended up with 2 additional students, they would be able to pull an individual from there. They did understand that the staffing ratio for us would, if they decide to keep 6 sections, that we wouldn't be paying more. And they understood that. There also, just so you know, is a floating range, because once students hit 5, then the ratio changes. So it is a little bit elastic as kids start to hit 5 kind of mid-year. So with that, they were, all 3 centers do have the flexibility of additional staff if the ratios go higher. And currently, Sarah is working with Madison Guerin to make sure that we're putting 13 to 1 across the sections.
And the 13 to 1 is the state requirement?
That is correct.
Okay. I think that's my only questions there.
Yeah, that was mine. So I'm good with this. I have no other questions either. So if we don't have any questions, we can take a motion here.
I move to approve ongoing 4K agreements with our 3 current community partners as presented tonight, with an updated contract language mentioned above and per pupil payment of $2,885 for the 25-26 school year. This motion allows the district administrator to finalize the contractual language with our 3 partners.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries, and I'd like to say just thank you to the centers for working with us. I know it's, the 2885 is per pupil. We've had that for a while, but I appreciate the centers just negotiating and working through another contract with the district. It's been a great partnership for so many years that I'm glad we could work something out. Appreciate it. All right, we're gonna move on to item F.
Well, yep, there's snow days, right? Within our employee handbook, staff that are unable to, and it's primarily for hourly employees, not to be penalized when the district has to close for weather, because they get paid when they're here. In the contract language, the handbook language does specify 2 specific dates, or 2 dates that the district closes will be compensated. However, last year we did have a pilot, and that pilot was added, and it specifically covered that the board approved for last year that would allow educational aides and our food service to cash in 2 sick days to go beyond the 2 if they wanted to be reimbursed if we were closed more than 2 days. Obviously, the snow events, we've hit 4, either cold or snow, and some of our aides came forward and said, can we still do it? And we looked at it and said, we did not come back to the board to get that approved or extended, and it was a pilot project. So we are bringing that back to ask for your permission to have that extended into this school year. Secondly, wanted to make sure that you understood that these are funds that we budgeted for their salaries, right? So it's not necessarily additional money, it's money that probably wouldn't go out because they weren't able to work, right? And so that was in place. The one thing that we, been talking with Chantel, who oversees our HR department, the only other hourly group that can't do additional work are our transportation drivers, and they were not initially included. When you think about like our admin assistants, they are currently working on high school registration, they can work from home, they have access, they help our principals. We're currently doing 4K enrollment, so it wasn't necessarily something that had to extend to like admin assistants. If we want to talk about that, that would be a whole different ballgame. In addition, understand that our custodians are kind of essential employees. Mike and his staff come and check on our boilers to make sure that they're up and running for emergency purposes. They do have to clear the entrances. And then there are many times that our athletics still move forward. And so we had a choir concert, we've had athletic events, so we don't necessarily have the ability to have 100% of our employees not report. That said, our transportation bus drivers are very similar to those two other groups. And so I'm asking to see if you would be willing to include them in this pilot. And the impact would be about $3,500 for the 2 additional days. And again, it's something that was in the budget. And so that is what's in front of you tonight.
Vicki, any questions here?
I don't have any questions. I think, I'm going to comment, I think adding the bus drivers in because same thing, the impact of not doing their morning routes and afternoon routes seems to fit with the reason we would be doing it for the other food service salaried employees, so.
No?
I don't have any questions. It makes sense.
Katie? Tanya?
It definitely makes sense to me. I'm happy to add bus drivers in there. Like you said, it's not, it's money that's already budgeted. If anything, we're saving money when we don't pay, but it's already budgeted within there. So I think it's very appropriate to do so. My one question would be, would we retro pay staff for the snow day or 2 that we had this year so far? I can't even remember how many we've had.
Oh, so they've already been compensated per
Okay.
the handbook?
Yep.
So it's for the last 2?
We extended the pilot, yep, and then,
And then the handbook covers, so we've only had 4 weather events. So
Okay.
this would cover.
up to the 2 days?
yeah.
Okay, good. And bus drivers too, we would include? Okay. Have we already paid bus drivers?
I would have to check with Veronica, but typically yes, because it's just,
Okay.
it's already handbook language.
Okay, okay. That's
All
it?
right. And Rick, this is the extension of a pilot, so when does this go actually into the handbook? Are we going to try to do this in the off?
So that's what I would encourage, is that after this, if this is something that we want to just make standard practice, that it just gets put into the handbook.
This
and-
next round?
Yes.
Yeah,
Can
okay.
you make sure to do that over the summer?
I'm on it. June 29th, 11:59.
Anybody want to make a motion here?
I move to approve extending the pilot program initiated during the 2023-24 school year for non-licensed staff per the employee handbook, which includes aides, food service, and bus drivers regarding snow day payments for the 24-25 school year.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. We're done with business. On to information discussion, and we're talking Tech Ed Outdoor Pavilion.
Yeah, so, I have, Mr. Figgy has a walk-up song, as you can see. We got that playing with his fan club. Interesting, it is.
For Bon Jovi, by the way.
One of the most interesting things, I think, is that last month we had a major donation of lumber. And I think you guys were reflecting back on the proposal for the mill and the kiln that Mr. Schmidt and Logan Figueroa Figueroa had presented, and it has saved our students' money, it has saved our district money, and that has, they had thought that it would take a couple of years for that to pay for itself, and it's paid for itself within 1 year. So you give these guys an inch, and they're going to take 100 yards. It's a great, and I remember at the meeting, Vicki, you kind of mentioned how great this project was. I said, wait till you see what's coming.
Yeah.
Well, little did I know that, I knew that they had a long-term plan, but guess what's coming? They decided that they would really like to present a new thought idea for you, and I've asked Mr. Figge and Rick Montreal to come forward and walk you through kind of a conceptual idea and what the benefits are.
Yeah, good evening. You get the B squad tonight. Mr. Figueroa and Mr. Schmidt aren't here, and neither of us have as much hair or as ruggedly handsome as they are. But we're going to do our best. We often talk, I feel like in these board meetings, about long-term planning and long-term vision. And Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Figueroa, I think, are two individuals for their department that have really embodied looking at the long-term programmatic changes and expansion that they can provide to the district. You know, there's no benefit to them in doing this. This is all for kids and where they see the program going to benefit students, not only at the high school level, but in the post-secondary realm. They're really appreciative of the board. You guys took a gamble on kind of a big, audacious goal that they had, which was adding in the kilns and the sawmill. We're one of only 2 schools in Wisconsin that have that, and now we're the biggest school in Wisconsin that provides that to students at the high school level. And like Dr. Spikuza said, within 1 year, it's now paid for itself. You can see the fruits of their labor out back, but if you've ever had an opportunity also to just tour what they did this year, you know that the space that they have is packed to the gills. You can smell the wood drying in the kiln. You can see all the projects that students are creating from all of the donated wood and wood that they have milled themselves. And then that's not to say anything about the educational experience of just taking something from production and manufacturing it into a finished product. For a few years, this has kind of been their dream, but they've always had a phase 2 in mind. They weren't expecting the success that they saw this year, but also with that success has come some of the hardship of the constrained facilities that we have in that tech ed area. So oftentimes, if you were here in the morning or driving by, you probably saw one of our 2 tech ed teachers with their personal vehicles towing the sawmill out, setting it up every morning, working with the kids to get everything set for the day for an outdoor classroom, and then doing the reverse of that at the end of the day. Taking it back in with a personal vehicle, tucking it into the shop at night, and then we were really, really tight with that space. So one of the things they had planned out as kind of a phase 2 expansion was to add in kind of a district pavilion or machine shed, and I like to think of it almost as an expansion of the classroom space right off of the parking lot. So if you look at the graphic up top, you can see the back of the high school, and there's our staff parking lot. And right now, if you were to drive around the back of our school, you would see that we have logs, we have finished boards, we have what some people would call a fire pit, and other people would call a fire hazard back there. But in that space, what we have envisioned, that's where we set up the sawmill this year, is the addition of a district pavilion or shed that would allow our students and our staff to set up permanently in that space and use it and expand our year for when we have the ability to mill wood, expand our kiln space. It would free up our existing tech ed space, especially on the wood side and the loft, to do what we have historically used it for, so we could continue to expand other programming. And if you go to the next slide, you're right with you. You can see some of the conceptualization of what they've been thinking. So like Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Figueroa typically do, they could have designed this themselves, they could have shopped this out, but they've been working with their classes for the last trimester and a half to conceptualize and ask questions and kind of put themselves in the empathetic mindset of what do we need? What do you as students need? What do we need for this program? What does the district need long term? In fact, all the way back in September, they held a meeting with myself, Dr. Spikuza, Mr. Montreal, Mr. Smith, our counselors, to even ask those same questions. So what does the district need? How could this building be multifunctional? We know what we need for tech ed, but what do we need for athletics out in that space, because we have practice fields that are adjacent. And then they took that feedback that they were given back to their students, and so they spent this time kind of conceptualizing and trying to synthesize what is it that the district needs and what is it that tech ed needs. And what they've come up with now is the hope that the school board would start to help give some questions back and give some feedback to us so that we could take that next leap to make this a reality. So if you go to the next slide, you can actually see this past week even, they were bringing in groups. So the Cleary Building Corporation came in with a guest speaker and did like a live demonstration with the students in the class to use CAD and some of our design software to take the students' feedback and then work with the students to build the conceptualization of what this outdoor space would be. And so kind of showing those students the relevancy of, if you want a career in this, this is exactly what you would be doing, and this is exactly how you would do it. Can we go to the next slide, Dr. Spicuzza? So what a lot of the students and staff came up with is, here's some of the benefits that they would see. Obviously, we've talked about some of them. It increases our space, increases storage, it's more efficient for our teachers, but in addition to that, it leads to more expansion. We can increase our kiln space, we can increase our rack space, it leads to expansion and increased efficiency within our existing tech ed areas. In addition to that, one of the things that Mr. Kosmalski and myself and Mr. Montreal have oftentimes talked about, I think for about 4 years now, is the addition of an outdoor classroom for our district. And we have different groups that come up here from the intermediate school, from the middle school. Certainly our students are going out there. We have environmental education classes that spend a lot of the fall and a lot of the spring out in our school forest. But they're doing a lot of transition back and forth. And so Mr. Schmidt and his classes have actually designed this so that it's got a classroom space within it, both for his students, so that they don't have to transition back and forth during those classes, but also for other classes that would want to use that. He's also, with Mr. Figueroa, hosted some adult education classes the last 2 years through Community Ed. And some people are building birdhouses and some people are going for broke. Mr. Barch was redesigning, I think, a closet, so I don't know how that went. But I think this is another, according to Mr. Barch, it didn't go so well. But this is just another multi-usable space that I think would be extremely beneficial for not only our classes, but also our community education. If you go to the next slide. So probably some of the questions you have. What does this look like? What's the, at least, ideal timeline according to our tech ed group? And then what's the cost? This is kind of the timeline they're hoping for. And if you ask Mr. Schmidt, we've been working with him, ideally, in his dream of dreams with, like Genie and the Lamp, it would be an opening of fall 2025. So that next year's groups that are doing the sawmill and doing his classes would be able to start to use this space. This is, the way they've conceptualized it, really just the frame of a building. The interior is largely unfinished because the premise is then to use this as a living project for the next 2 or 3 years of tech ed classes to finish the inside, teach construction methods 1, construction methods 2, some of the concrete work, some of the plumbing work, some of the drywall work, and not only use that as an educational benefit, but also then save money, teaching students these skills and then having them actually carry it through that project. I'll have you go one more slide, please. One of the biggest questions is probably, what does this cost? You've given us the benefits, what's the cost? And this is one of the more difficult things because there's a lot of permutations. So we're actually still seeking some bids, but the ultimate suggestion of what we've seen is Cleary has been a great partner. Obviously, I showed you the picture. They came in, they worked with our students. They gave us a price completely built of $58,000. And that's a lifetime warranty on a steel-sided steel roofed building that our students would then be able to, they've agreed to let us learn on site as they build it, and then participate on some of those projects, and then on the interior, give us the go-ahead to finish out that construction project. Mr. Schmidt's always one for details, so he did ask them, what if it's just the materials provided by Cleary, but our students actually build the structure from scratch, from the ground up? What if we only go with a 40 by 40? So he wanted to give the board a lot of different permutations, but ultimately what the suggestion is of Tech Ed and working with our custodians and working with us would be organizing around that 40-foot by 60-foot footprint to make sure we have adequate space for the multi-use needs that we're hoping for. I'm going to stop there, just because there's a lot more slides, but I don't know if we need to get into the weeds on some of those before I take some questions from the board.
Yeah, I'll just open it up. Tanya, do you have any questions so far?
Yeah, I think, so this is in our information discussion, so some of this stuff is just to kind of take back and think about, I presume, too. And so, first of all, funding-wise, this is maybe more of a Rick question. If we were to help fund this, would it be able to come through Fund 46 if we wanted it to? Or is that something to look into for the next, because it's building maintenance? Okay. So that's one question I would have, just for the funding's sake. I was also curious, do you know if Josh and his team had a specific recommendation? I see 3 choices on there, really. Did they have a recommendation? Is it the 40 by 64?
It's that's the 40 by 64.
And with the Clearly building it? Or the second one down, it looks like we're kind of building it.
We talked to Mr. Schmidt at the end of the day, just to make sure before we got here tonight, and the ideal is to have Cleary build it for us.
Yeah, okay. And kind of, I was leaning that way too, and some of it is because I would want to know a little bit more about liability and all of that kind of stuff if it becomes a long-term building that we're using and operating in the community might be for certain times too and stuff. So that makes sense to me, and it's just less that our teachers are having to prepare for all the time. So those are things. And then I had just some questions about, first of all, I saw that in the diagram, there's a spot for 2 kilns. Do we have 1 now or 2?
Right now I believe we have just a single kiln.
That's what I thought too. Okay, so it's a potential to add another one and stuff like that.
And we have 2 racks right now, and I believe they are looking at an expansion of 4 racks to dry more wood.
Okay. And then the conversations that come much more from like a management kind of level is the sustainability of programs like this, the enrollment numbers, are they still staying high? Is there, all of that kind of stuff. I obviously think our teachers are the best around, and I think other people do as well. And so I don't want to lose them ever, and so I would want to make sure that sustainability, if we were to put a big investment into this, that we know that even without our rock stars there, this is a program that can continue and stuff like that too. So, and that's, I think, questions that you guys are probably working through on your own, but that's what I have. Thanks.
Yeah. Vicki, anything?
I guess, the long-term uses that you see for this, I thought I saw something about possibly using it for concessions type thing, using it for storage, for football. Was there any other type things along those lines that you could see down the future that we would need? Or even currently, probably for the football stuff, storage aspect of it.
I think we have a kind of a multitude of needs. Bluntly put, we're out of space for Tech Ed right now.
Yeah.
Those 2 have expanded so much so, and we have so many students doing projects right now that we're having to turn down projects or downscale projects because we don't have the interior space to meet the needs that our kids are presenting. So for Tech Ed alone, that would be beneficial. For our sports, if you've been back in our athletic storage, we're out of space. And we've been out of space for the 8 years I've been here. And so it would be beneficial for football, cross-country, track, potentially others to store out there. I know that custodial always has a need for exterior storage space around here. So that would be a benefit. We don't host many events back here right now, but if you think about, we've seen an expansion in the past 2 years. UW River Falls is using us. our cross-country, we have events. Everything we do with those is set up kind of open air with pop-up tents.
Yep.
Some of the feedback we've gotten is it'd be really great to have like a site for concessions. It'd be really great to have a site for if a student is having a medical emergency, something that's more prominent than just a pop-up tent.
Okay.
So this affords us the opportunity, and we've kind of had that discussion, it affords us the opportunity to have an open-air space. If there's a weather event, we've got an open-air space that's immediately right there that we can still host out of. So kind of a multitude of reasons to use it, and probably to the point where if it gets built, we would have to really put some hard
Yeah.
restrictions on
What
how we
actually-
use that
yep.
space.
Yep.
Helen, do you have any questions?
I just have a comment. I think that the proof is in the pudding, right? These guys are amazing. This program has moved leaps and bounds, and it does service our students, right? There is a demographic of students, and mine being one, that this is their passion, and this is what they sometimes come to school for, so that's pretty amazing. And it's real life skills. So, I think it's an amazing opportunity to use the space that we already have back there in multiple ways. So, yeah, I think this is amazing.
Yeah, you guys, I'm sure Pat would have some questions here too, so we should probably reach out to him.
He's going to be bummed he wasn't here tonight.
So I would absolutely want to.
I was anticipating, like, what is the gauge of the steel siding?
Yeah,
or-
down the dip.
Right. So, I mean, it'd probably be good to get some input from Pat on this. Is this something that would come back to us next month to vote on?
Well, I think that's up to you. I think there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So it's really.
I'm just trying to
dependent on-
understand timelines, because there is some aggressive timeline here for the fall. So I'm just trying to understand, like, what do you need from us? And what kind of decisions need to be framed up? I do have my own, I mean, my questions are around finance and how we're gonna pull this off. If it's something we can pull from Fund 46, it makes it a little bit easier. But if we gotta, pull some strings to build it into a budget somehow for Fund 10, out of Fund $10, then we should probably talk about that a little bit more and what that means.
So I think kind of what you're hearing from the board is we're really in support of this. I think our teachers have shown us like just what they can do with that kind of learning with our students. And so kind of let us know your timelines if it comes back next time, the time after that. We do, obviously there was a lot of questions and things to think through, finance being one of them. My other one, did you say this would kind of go in the parking lot area? Because one of them is the facilities planning that we're currently kind of starting to look at. Like, I don't want us to take away space that might potentially be something else
Yeah.
down the road. So
I think those were the two big questions we anticipated coming in.
Yeah.
Was finance being one of them, and whether this was even something that you wanted to explore, or if it was hey, it's a good idea, but it's not a good idea right now. And then the second one was just the location and space usage off of the parking lot. It's about
Yeah.
10 feet off the parking lot right now. So working with Mr. Smith, it's not going to impede anything in terms of current athletics and the footprint there. And it's, we believe, close enough to the parking lot where you wouldn't necessarily see another building going in there. We believe it's out of the way of the extension of Pine Street.
Okay. So those are the other things to
I guess,
kind of
yeah,
talk through too
Yep.
and get clearance from whether it's the city or whatever it is, but yeah.
So, and on this slide, they did a nice job,
Yeah.
Pine Street is not ours, right? So it looks like a driveway, but it is a city, and there is a future plan for it. So it is a building that would require a permit. They are looking to see what the cost is, and then we'd look at easements. We would also, you can see in year 2, we'd want to add a generator or electricity. We just need to know how and where that will be coming from, and then what disruption that is, right, for either cutting through asphalt and putting that in. So there are some, I think that personally, I really applaud, and I, don't want to be anything that would slow the progress. I do think that April would be too aggressive, given all the other financial things we're trying to get in place. First and foremost, just about the staffing and the job study. We are pushing the finance department in many different ways. And I think the easiest one is we can get the clarification, could it be considered capital? And then it would just have to be added to Fund 46. I'll check on that. I think May would probably be a more realistic, but it doesn't necessarily stop us from refining some of these
Right.
and continuing to meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on top of the, finding out from the city what our distances have to be. And I think Tanya had mentioned, we're looking at long-term planning. I think we really need to kind of fit this in and make sure that we're not restricting ourselves anyway back there. If we were to eventually move a football field, if we were to eventually build a bigger track, if we were to do something else onto that back area, even with the low forested area that we have back there, like, we don't want to hamstring ourselves. So I think finding out exactly where it could sit, where it would sit, getting those specifics, I think it's a great idea. But yeah, figure out how to pay for it and go from there.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Josh, please thank your tech ed guys, Kyle and Logan. Really appreciate the work that they've been putting in.
All right, we're gonna move on to item B, superintendent search process update. I don't know if we have anything we want to share or anything, Rick, but maybe the website might be not a bad place to start.
Exactly where it went.
We've been busy. So just to give you a quick rundown over the last week, we met with HYA, our consultant on the search process, the firm that we hired, Hazard, Young and Atia. We met with them on March 3rd and went through the profile report that they put together based on the feedback from the survey results that they got from the community members and staff members and everybody that was solicited to add feedback for that, and that put together a profile for us on what we were looking for. It's out on the website. I'm not going to go through it tonight. We went through it in public session last week, but I would encourage everybody to go through it. There's some really great information out there, and I think what I got out of that meeting was we're pretty much all lined up on what we're looking for here, and it was kind of just a reality check, I think, for all of us to just confirm where we feel like the public was coming from, where we feel the staff is at, with what kind of characteristics we're looking for in a superintendent. So that was very helpful. And then we had our first round of interviews. We interviewed, I think there was roughly 20 candidates that applied, I want to say, 2021. We narrowed it down to 6 first round interviews with the help of our search firm who did all the vetting, all of the screening. They talked with every they talked with every candidate and helped us get to the point where we could have a healthy discussion on how to get it down to 6. And so the board did that. That was obviously in closed session because there's names involved. And we conducted those interviews, those first round interviews, last Saturday, March 8th. So we interviewed 6 candidates on Saturday. Went through that process. I thought it was a very productive, healthy day. 6 solid candidates. I mean, we had some really solid. I'm excited. I can't wait for you guys to actually see the 3 finalists. But we did get it down to the final 3, and there they are on the screen: Nicholas Bean, James Reef, and Tim Shiger. Shiger?
Shiger, I thought he said.
Okay, I thought it was Shiger. I thought he said, is it Shiger?
I think it's Shiger.
Okay, Shiger. We'll go with Shiger. Tim
He's
Shiger.
probably listening. He can let us know.
All right. Well, there you go. So we have the 3 finalists. All our will be coming to the school on March 26th. The school district on March 26th to basically do a full day in the district. And there's another, again, out on the website. There's a link to actually on this screen here. You can see the day in the district. If you're interested in seeing what's going on and who they're going to be meeting with, each candidate will be visiting all 3 schools. They'll be talking to people throughout the day. There's scheduled time with staff, with admin team, with the community. I think even Rick, you're involved in the interviews as well. So it's basically a chance for everybody in the district that wants to meet the candidates and talk to them and ask them questions to do that. And there's time set on that day for all the candidates to meet with everybody that's interested. It's a really exciting day. It's going to be, I'm sure it's going to be a long and grueling day for them. Because it goes from 8:30 to what's the last time?
It's like
there?
7 something, yeah.
So they're pretty much going 12 hours. So it'll be a long day for them, but it'll be a chance for everybody to meet the 3 candidates. And from those discussions and meetings that you folks all have with these candidates, you'll have the opportunity, and we fully hope that the community and everybody that participates in this will provide their feedback through I believe it's like a portal of some sorts that they'll be able to scan in a QR code and provide the feedback. You'll get all this information coming up in the next couple of weeks, especially on that day. I'm sure it'll be available for everybody on that day. But everybody will have a chance to provide feedback that will then be funneled to us as a board. And that's an important piece, because the very next day is when we know.
I thought it was.
Yeah, 27th.
Yeah, it's the
Yep.
Thursday.
Yep, Wednesday's day in district and Thursday
Yeah,
is. Yep.
so the very next day, the board will conduct the second round of interviews for each of these candidates. And after those 3 interviews, basically we'll probably, I assume we'll be going into deliberation. We'll be taking all that feedback that we get from the community and from the staff and admin team and all the stakeholders, and try to come up with what we think is the right choice for our next superintendent. Anything I missed? Anything you want to share about the interview process or anything else, Tom?
We have a few drivers in this room too, so thank you guys for I don't know if you're voluntold or volunteered, but thank you for driving. I think, that's some of the feedback I look forward to most from hearing, is some of those informal times as well as the formal times and stuff. So I'm really excited about this process. It is a really long day, but one of our priorities from the community and each of us when we were interviewed about our priorities was just engagement and reaching out and being able to connect with staff. And so we want to make sure that we get all those different voices from all the different stakeholders. So we're excited. Mike, can I just clarify? Are we interviewing at 1 o'clock the next day, right? That's what I had.
I believe it's
Okay,
1.
just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
So I think, we're all committed too, where we're taking off work and stuff and coming in and interviewing at 1 o'clock. And hopefully within a handful of days within that, we'll be able to announce something.
And it is really important that folks that want to give feedback, give it immediately after they're done that night, that evening. We're going to need that feedback to be turned around quickly so we can have access to it. We would all appreciate that. Anything else? I'm excited. The 3 finalists, I hope, I can't wait for everybody to meet them and get feedback from them, I think, from everyone. 3 really, really strong candidates. We had a tough time just getting it to 3.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right, we're going to move on to item C, State Funding 101.
All right. Well, we want to set my successor up for success, right? And so the Cardinal Connection that Andrea helps put together of our newsletter will be going out and hitting mailboxes, I think, within the next 7 days. She's done a really nice job of capturing kind of the spirit of our district and all the great things and programs that are in place. But we also are having a call to action. As you know, the next biennium budget is being discussed currently at the state level. We've talked about priorities, and we've talked about how it impacts public schools, specifically for Prescott. We are going to provide you with contacts in the Cardinal Connection about who your assembly rep and senator representatives are, as well as how you can provide feedback. A couple things that we as a board have talked about and our commitments from the WASB, which is the mothership for school boards, and then the superintendent lobbyist group, is that we are really trying to advocate for special education funding. Currently, it is at 30%, and it is woefully underfunded, and we are moving $1.8 million out of Fund 10. So any additional dollar that goes to special ed funding is a dollar that goes back into operations and to staff programs and into staff salaries. The key word here is also for our legislators to be honest and transparent, and to make sure that the funding is called fund sufficient. They are not funding special education at a fund sufficient. What they put out is a fixed amount of money, and as the money is drawn down, it is then prorated when it is being drawn out on the second year. So we started out being reimbursed at 32%, and it's going to drop to 30% this year. So we are asking that if they fund it at 60%, they put in what is referred to as fund sufficient to make sure that the 60% of all requests are met for the additional programming. Smaller class sizes, higher degreed, and medical complex students are additional costs. We want to make sure that we give the appropriate supports and accommodations to our students so that they benefit from the programs. The only way we can do it is that the funding comes from the state. Per pupil funding, we've talked a lot about it. We have been in the lowest 4 percentile. We also want to advocate that it gets reconnected to inflation. That was decoupled in 2009 for all districts, and obviously we would be receiving about $3.8 million more if it was still tied to inflation. Early literacy, the legislators can say that they gave more money to public education for early literacy. That is true. It never reached one child in the state of Wisconsin. It did not reach one teacher, one classroom. They made the allocation, and then they held it hostage. We believe that that $5 million needs to be released. It obviously won't happen, and we believe that it's a major injustice for allocations to be made and never hit the classroom when they're holding schools accountable for making sure that we dot every single I and deliver to the high standards that we have. Mental health is the other fourth major area. Understand that mental health, we lost over $45,000 for mental health services, but as a district, we stayed committed to it. One of the things that happened is that they did not hold smaller districts harmless. They moved the funding from block grants to per pupil because we have fewer students and declining enrollment, but we still have students at all levels. It did hurt Prescott Public Schools to the tune of a loss of $45,000. We believe that they should at least go back to the previous funding level, and then if they want to do it at a per pupil, that's great, but make sure that we're held harmless at the $85,000 that we were receiving. Also, just for local farmers, know that the food service grant that allowed us to partner and buy food for our food service and deliver that farm to cafeteria has been discontinued, and we believe that that is very unfortunate for both our educational purposes, the learning that happened, and also the partnerships that we had. We are building out a district website that's dedicated to action, and so if you go out to our district website, you'll see I won't navigate there right now, but if you go to the district, you'll see a drop down and it says State Funding 101. Want to thank Mandy Matzik and Andrea for working on that, and that'll have updated information It'll include the Cardinal Connection with regards to our representatives, and then ways that you can advocate for these 4 things. My door, my window, my email box is open if anybody has questions about any of these 4 things. And I think it's important for us to keep an ear to the ground, as these will be final decisions that will be coming at the end of the year and will impact Prescott for the next 2 years. I would be remiss if I didn't at least address that federal funding is in probably a precarious and fragile state. As you know, as of today, 50% of the federal government public education, Department of Public Education have been released. How that might impact how funding occurs or the flow-through, I can't say. All I would say is that it just does create a lot of variability and difficult for us to set in stone and know that we have guaranteed funds coming. Very similar to the $5 million appropriation for early literacy. It's made but never delivered. So I don't know if you have any comments, but I wanted to make sure that our public saw that and is able to continue to help advocate for the future of public schools.
Anybody got any comments? Comments or questions?
No, I looked at the website though, and I know it's a work in progress right now, and that'll be great. I hear a lot of people comment that they would like to write letters, they'd like to call, they just don't always know that they have the most accurate information and where to find it, so I think that's a great place that we can direct people to. One thing I would love to see on there is some sort of like templated letter, so that way people, like, obviously we're filling in the blanks and stuff, but for people that have never written a letter like that, it's kind of there, they can download it and they can make it their own, so. Yeah,
Thanks.
great.
And I was able, while you were talking, able to navigate so you can see where it says School Funding 101, and the things that you just mentioned are exactly
Yeah.
what you'll see coming. And so we will have both the representatives, how you can contact them, and then some talking points that you could share.
All right. Thanks, Rick. Excellent. We'll move on. Item D is Human Growth and Development Committee update.
Yes, Michael Kozmowski, and I know Josh Figge was there last night as well. We did the kickoff. You approved a slate of community members to serve in an advisory role. Was able to kind of review the slides with Mr. Kozmowski before yesterday's event. That went off, from what I hear, extremely well. I am having trouble getting the slide up, but I wanted to thank and also put the names up of the community members that are participating. We had everybody in attendance that was part of the slate, and my understanding is that they were able to outline kind of what the role and function of the committee is, what their timelines are, and the commitment. And so on page 4 of the presentation, this is the slate of individuals that are going to be meeting over time to look at both the standards, the content, and the resources. I want to thank our teaching staff. We have Jordan Hansen, Avery Pothoff, and Sam Swick, a first-year teacher at the middle school, and then Amy Kraus, who's our district nurse, and obviously Michael Kozmowski of Teaching and Learning. The feedback that I heard both from Mr. Figge and then Michael himself, and was able to talk to him, he couldn't be more happy with the group, how serious they were taking the roles, and looking forward to that engagement and then the recommendations for the board.
Anybody have any comments on this one?
No, I look forward to hearing more.
All right, thanks, Rick. We'll move on. Item E is Transportation Review and Update.
Yeah, I'm going to have Rick Montreal come forward. As you know, Rick Montreal serves at the high school and works with our students, but he also took on added duties at the beginning of this year, and he's working with Heather Christensen, who is in her first year as Transportation Director. Rick has been outstanding in his leadership role, kind of expanding into a new area. It covers athletics, but it covers busing on an everyday basis. You know that we talked about our fleet and how we replenish. We did take a cut and we did not purchase a bus for this year. We started out asking Heather and Rick to come back to the board with a presentation that basically answers the question, how many buses do we need in our fleet. How many buses do we currently have? And to basically bus students to and fro, and then for school, and then how many buses do we need for extracurricular activities? So Rick is here on behalf of Heather and the administrative team to kind of walk you through answering that question. How many buses do we need? And what options do we have currently and long-term?
Yeah, good evening, Board. That sounds like a pretty good place to start. So that is the first slide that you have in front of you. Just kind of a breakdown of where we are for our school bus fleet. And working with Heather, I realize that we have 19 right now full-length buses that are online over in the garage. That would mean that they're able to run on any, on short notice. Of the 19, 10 of those are consistently used daily for our bus routes, which include all our kids from 4K all the way to 12th grade. If you continue then, like Dr. Spikuza said, with extracurricular needs, that ranges anywhere from one bus to, on a really busy night, to 4 other buses. And I would say with the kind of the realignment of bus routes that have gotten longer with less routes also, we don't have, I think, kind of in the old days, we would have drivers that could go out, do a route, and then get back for a pickup for an extracurricular trip. And that isn't the case very often anymore. So these are literally extra buses that are needed because the 10 buses that are running routes are still out. With extenuating circumstances, we could have another 2 buses for a grand total of 6 extra buses that could be needed on a really busy spring afternoon. I have talked with Matt Smith about that. That's a bit of an outlier. Knock on wood here, there is nothing set up that way right now for the spring sports schedule, but we know that things get canceled and moved around a lot this time of year. So looking at that, if you're kind of keeping track, we could be at 16 buses so far of the 19. Heather and Aaron over at the bus garage always want 1 or 2 extra buses kind of as backup because mechanical things happen, there's maintenance needs, tires need to be put on, all kinds of things that are going on over there. So with that, of the 19, based on the oldest bus, we're looking right now, if the board approves, we would be looking to sell a bus, put it with Wisconsin Surplus, the online auction site. We sold 2 buses on that site this summer, 2 of the oldest buses we had. The current bus we're looking at is the oldest bus, but it is a good running bus. And then there's possibly 1 more that we would look at selling as well. That would be predicated, though, on how soon the board would consider or at least think about updating the fleet with a new bus. And I think that's kind of the gist of where we're going here tonight and what we're asking you to think about.
So Rick, you and Heather are kind of saying we could jettison at least 1 bus for sure, and it's running.
Yep.
We have to, by statute, go through the auction house.
Yeah.
Do you recall roughly what we got for the bus last year?
Yeah, I do. The older buses, it was about $2,500 per bus, and we had 2. So we netted a whopping $5,000.
So it's important, one, just to make sure we have kind of our, at least, a barometer of what we might get. The other bus, we could go up to 2, but it would require us to get a replacement. Because my understanding is that based on just the number of buses required in our fleet, to get rid of 2, we would then put ourselves in a shortage.
Right. 1 is very comfortable, and that's from Heather. And 2 would be potentially putting us in a pinch that we could avoid. With Dr. Spikuza, some direction from him, he asked if I could look into potentially an external provider for some extra trips, especially on a really busy, let's say a sports night, or we have activities that are exceeding that 4 extra bus threshold. Just kind of out of curiosity to see what that would cost. I did do that, and I've talked to Matt about that too. I talked to Heather about that as well. It would be a lot more expensive to do that, and that would be something I think the board would have to think about. And if there's questions on that, I'll take them when we're through, but for now, I'll just leave it at that. And then I think like Dr. Spikuza said, and I alluded to, I think updating our current bus inventory is pretty important. We've gone a little while now since we purchased the last bus with Tim, and I think everybody would agree, buses are getting older, and so to be consistent and comprehensive, that's what we're here to talk about tonight. On the next slide then is kind of the breakdown of how we would get there to acquire a new bus. Bus prices right now, if you buy outright, would be in the $130,000 range, up to potentially $140,000. The reason there's a range there, we have a bid right now, kind of that has been presented by a company of the bus that the drivers and Heather would want, that is going for $130,000 right now, just a shade under. That same bus, if we were to wait until next fiscal year after July, would be $140,000 to $142,000. So that's why I put the range up there. It would all be timing. If the board, if you wanted to move quicker on this, we could save some money because of the model being more expensive with the next make or the next year. But that's an outright purchase. There's also been a lot of talk. Dr. Spikuza a few months ago was, we discussed the option of financing or leasing a bus essentially that would then spread out the payments. The lease I've been looking at has been a 5-year payback period. I think we could get some financial flexibility, and that would be coupled with being able to monitor the decreasing enrollment that comes up so often. And then I also think it would provide a predictable financial obligation across years and still provide that more reliable transportation, that new bus that we're hoping that you consider.
And just to be clear, it would be a lease to own?
Lease to
right?
own, yeah. After 5 years, we would outright own it. It would essentially be paid off.
And you have a handout in yellow, and I'll pull it up on screen when we come back to how that might look.
The third option, we did talk kind of briefly about trying to find a used bus, and that would not only be the immediate obvious cost savings, but it would be likely a quicker timeline, assuming we could have greenlit the financing. When we took that approach, it didn't take long to realize that to find the just right bus and to have the right year, the right miles, it was very problematic, and in fact, we didn't really find a bus that we thought would fit what we were looking for, new enough, less miles, in good enough shape. So we haven't gone much further on that one, but I just did want to bring it up as something we did look at. So that would bring us to our last slide in terms of Fund 46 has come up a few times tonight. So we're kind of back at it here with possibly looking at Fund 46. Our enrollment numbers are documented well. The state formula, funding formula, everybody knows about that. So any extra dollars coming in, just not going to happen. As I said, the high need to acquire a new bus is there in order to sustain the fleet, to be safe and reliable. So we would be recommending that we would add the bus fleet to Fund 46 for that increased flexibility for purchasing the bus within year budgets are tight. If I go back to the lease, well, hold on, I'm sorry. So summarizing, Fund 46 would allow that sustained approach with a little bit of a long-term window to continue to address not only this need right now that we feel like we have, but additional needs that we can expect to see in the future when it comes to more bus purchases. The yellow sheet
Can I just jump?
Yeah,
can I ask
sure.
About the Fund 40. So in order to get it to Fund 46, it has to be part of that 10-year plan? Is that, so that's basically, all we're saying is, we're gonna put the bus fleet in the 10-year plan so we can then use it as a lever if we need it, right?
Right,
That's
that's
the
my
proposal.
understanding, yes.
And if you were on, aligned with that, those are things we would be bringing back in April.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna start using it all the time from Fund 46, but it gives us that opportunity too if we need it.
100%, yep.
Okay.
It's just another safety net.
Yep, okay.
And then that last piece, the yellow sheet there, this is the actual lease payment schedule, based on the rate that was quoted there up on the top. I was just talking to this gentleman yesterday or the day before, really recently, so that rate could be locked in. He kind of mocked this up for us so we could at least discuss and talk about it and see it. You might notice right away, the price that I had quoted him was $142 because I had not communicated well enough with Heather. I just didn't know that there was that variance from $130 right now to $142 until after July 1, and I made that assumption. That was my mistake. So I just threw $142 at him, and that's what he drafted for us. And you can see if on the columns over there, the number that repeats, the 31,132, would essentially be the payout every year for 5 years. And then the 142 jumps up about 13,000 and some change due to the rate and the interest of when you would be paying back, or when we would be paying back the lease.
So you can see in the bottom chart where it has date, payment, and interest. You have interest and principal. Over 5 years, it adds $13,600. The benefits, as you look, it is a lease, right? So it's a standard 3,100. It's a little bit cheaper than our one-to-one Chromebooks, in all honesty, and gives you a little bit more flexibility, both either within a budget or just to kind of manage. One of the things that we're talking about is historically, we bought a bus every year. And I think you and Heather are coming to a year-end proposal likely that it would be every other year is what we'd be looking at.
Yeah, honestly, I think it would be, the sweet spot is probably a little more frequent than that, talking to Heather. Maybe 2 out of 3, but I think right now, if we could at least settle into every other, that would be a good starting point.
So that would basically, you could have potentially 3 loans that you're paying off at once, which, I mean, just rough math, it's roughly about $100,000 a year to pull that off. Is that what you're kind of?
I think if this model is the way that the board
you
decides
stack
to go,
them.
right,
Yeah.
yep.
Yep.
I don't know that we'd be held to this model, though, next time this comes
Right.
around, right? I
Right.
mean, we could
Yep.
certainly vary the approach at that point.
And I think for what Heather's looking at is obviously high mileage, 20-year buses
Yep.
tend to take more, we need a mechanic to
Yeah.
replace and
Yep.
the repairs. So does this give you an alternative option to
Well,
have
and
newer buses?
that was kind of one of my bigger questions a few months ago when we knew Tim was retiring, is we're losing that expertise in the bus garage. So how can we continue to operate the buses for reasonable cost and sustain that? And it looks like with leasing and then moving that into, say, with Fund 46, say we're putting in, if we do get to the point of maybe 3 buses that we're rotating on the 5-year plan, something like that, then at least it's a number that we have built into the budget that's always there that we're dealing with, that we know, versus we have a bus that breaks and then we'll do fine this year, but we got to figure out how to pay for it next year. So I like the idea of being able to have that as a planned expense, because we are a very large district and we need buses. So large in miles, my
Yes.
area. There we go, large in area.
Rick, do you have anything else?
No, I was just going to say if there's any other questions.
Do you have any questions, Tanya?
Do you have well, you probably don't necessarily have a recommended way of doing it. I mean, lease is one way. Incurs about $15,000 additional with interest, right? And so you think potentially we're doing 2 or 3 of those at a time, and it adds up quick. So I'd like to see what flexibility we have in our budget now, because kind of like what Mike's alluding to, after a couple years and you stack those on, basically our payments are outright buying a bus just for the payments. So that's something I'd be interested in knowing. I do think adding this to Fund 46 is great. How long does it have to be within our 10-year plan before we can start pulling from it? Is it still that 3, is it right away then?
It was, yeah, so
Okay.
when we first built it, you're right, there was a
Yeah.
5-year holding. Now, what we're learning is that you'll have another presentation about
Okay.
technology.
Yep.
But what we're doing is going beyond brick and mortar and facilities to include large capital, which is what Fund 46 is for, and we would really like to expand it to include our bus fleet and then ultimately technology.
Okay, okay.
And so as soon as we put it on there, it now becomes a lever you could always use.
And so the difference in price, there was the 130 and then the 142, and that's just because probably like demand increases, yeah. So then, we could buy it outright for around 130, or lease it, and it'll incur $25,000 additional, because it's also, well, I mean, I guess you said it could be at 130, so yeah.
Yeah,
15.
It'll be at 130.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's important, I think,
Okay.
for, and that's probably the next big question. I'm hearing that Fund 46, none of you really are worried about that, because just because it's in Fund 46
Great.
doesn't mean it's automatic. It just
Right.
gives you another
Option.
option.
Yep.
I think the next big thing would be, again, this is information discussion, but we do know that there is a price increase planned for July 1. That's just part of, right, so we're buying kind of an older model, or not an older model, we're buying this year's model.
Model year.
And the discount is about 12 grand. The difficulty, if we wait for July 1, is that there are some economic factors that we can't control, such as tariffs and steel and automobiles, that we already know the price point is to go to 142. It could go higher. I just want us to be aware that if we're interested in trying to get a bus, I think we went through the options that a used bus isn't going to work for us. We're kind of in do we come back and try to purchase within this year, or do we wait to July 1?
Yeah, and for me, it seems like within this year, and I would just be curious about the flexibility with, can we do it? Are we able to financially? If not, then leasing seems like the option really, or else,
Yeah, if it's this year and we can save
yeah,
that $12,000 or $13,000 or more,
it's great.
and it's doable, then we could still look at the lease as an option too, and just
Yep.
redraft the whole mock-up, but
Yep.
that's just what we were coming to you with tonight.
Yeah.
And if there is a new bus coming, you're selling one, you would sell two?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'd make $5,000-ish, which isn't a ton, but, I mean,
I
something we need to,
I think a little more this time.
okay, good.
And to be honest, remember, we have to insure all the buses. So, you do.
Save that
You
way,
do
too.
save some of that. And so, but I think it gives us one, it jettisons two and
Yep.
replaces with a more reliable bus.
Yep.
And to answer your, I think, kind of second question about timelines and like kind of our pattern of replacing these, when I was first on the board, it was every year. Rick and I, that's how we came on. It was every year, and we were able to do that until, finances got tight, basically, and we didn't need to do that. And so I think it makes sense for us to commit to every other year, knowing, because I'm looking at the mileage, the years, I was kind of surprised the ones we were going to sell, because it's not the ones with the most miles, but I'm sure there's other reasons there too.
Yeah.
And so, knowing like, we could commit to every other year. I think it's great for budgetary reasons, and we should look at kind of modeling that out. But there's a potential that we're going to have to, on every once in a while, to your point, have to replace one extra within that sequence.
I think so.
Yeah.
Just because of, eventually you get even further behind the age of the buses too.
Yeah, I mean, some of these are back to, was it 2005? Yeah. So they're getting up there.
All right, are we good?
Yep.
All right, thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
We are moving on to the last item, technology updates. Fund 46.
So Andy Holland and 4 other individuals are at a state conference looking at WISE data and things like that. So I'm going to present on his behalf. But what I'm going to do is bring up, kind of Mike Hoyka's Fund 46 long-range plan. You saw this last month, and I just wanted to kind of remind you, if you work left to right, the tabs, what we have is a summary page is the first tab, and that's the facility budget summary for 2024 forward. And the way that Mike and I are envisioning this is that we have then a tab for every building. We also are including grounds, the Performing Arts Center, and then transportation and technology. Historically, it was only buildings and then the summary. The idea would be is that we would always have those updated, and then they migrate by discussions internally by the district administrator, the board, and Mike Hoyka to move things to the first page. And that will be how you kind of know what the projects are more likely to hit and what's going to be coming forward. As we go forward, what we're going to share with you is that technology, we've really put it into buckets. And what we wanted to share with you is that we do have an IT detailed site inventory list. We know exactly how many staff computers there are, how many Chromebooks there are, how many interactive whiteboards, how many projectors. So what he did is to help the board is just to look at site security. We have cameras internally and externally on every single facility that are in operation 24/7 for the first time in 10 years. And that, again, is a thank you to our community for investing in that infrastructure. What he shared with me is that we are currently in the high school, and if there was cameras that started to end of life, it's about a 10-year period. If we had to replace all the cameras in and outside this facility, that's $100,000. And right now, we do not give Andy $100,000 in his budget on an annual basis. So if you're just starting there, then we know that we've added key fobs for control, basically for entrances to our buildings for safety and security. It is both the controller, the hardware, and then the readers, the little black box on each. The black boxes and the readers aren't as expensive, but again, he said if there was something like an electrical surge, if the controllers go out, it might be able to be absorbed within a budget, but it also might go beyond what he has in a budget. Then our interactive instructional boards, we have basically a more detailed list by room, by school. And this year, Malone, we did a lot of updates. We skipped their staff computer upgrades, and now we're looking to get that back in place. We also have projectors. We have the network, and then servers and staff computers. So you quickly can see that for Andy, just in what he's listed, and it's not complete, it could be roughly $300,000. And so what we're working with Mike Hoyka is to start identifying what is the product in these multiple categories, when were they installed, what's the life expectancy, what is today's cost? This is what Pat Block asked us last time. And then if we were to say, if this is today's cost and it's likely to be replaced in 5 years, we would just put in the inflationary formula, and you would be able to kind of have a better prediction on that. So the main thrust tonight is that we really, the two T's, transportation and technology, we wanted to see if the board understands why we would be adding it to Fund 46. We would be coming back in April in board minutes. You just have to adopt that you've added that to your 10-year long-range plan. Those minutes then go to CLA, our auditors, so that when you draw upon it, it's approved. Then we will be coming back to you before the end of the year to add the grounds. And if you think about our football fields, irrigation, dugouts and things like that, and then the Performing Arts Center, we're looking at an April, May. We have major LED lights, we have soundboards. If any of those things, again, a power surge, our microphones, those are things that are ongoing costs that we want to make sure that we have a safety net. In talking with Baird, they recommend that district school boards revisit their long-range plan at least 3 times a year. And so the idea would be that we've kind of touched it a couple times. It would just give you the opportunity so that it's always fresh, and like the buses, or in this case, we have a great proposal from Tech Ed, and I believe it qualifies. I just want to make sure that I verify, and then that would go under something under grounds or facilities. Any questions with why we are proposing this addition?
Helen, you have any questions here?
No, I don't have any questions. Makes sense.
Vicki?
No, I don't have questions. I think it's great to have it all on here so we can see it, so that we can answer questions about numbers and costs, because, yeah, this stuff is not inexpensive.
Tanya?
No question, but we have talked a lot about Fund 46 tonight, and so just a reminder for our community that Fund 46 is essentially like a savings account for us for items such as this, non-operational, not related to staff, but really about things that we can feel, touch, be in and stuff. So we don't have to take from it, but we have been putting money aside, and this was started, Rick, maybe 7-ish years ago at this point, and has been a really handy and fiscally responsible way to plan for some of our long-term budgetary items. So, and Mike, this is our first time really using this new version, I think. We saw it and we walked through it, but this is a really nice way to look at it too, and helps us with long-term planning.
Yeah, agreed. My only question was around Fund 46 and policy, and we have a policy. Do we, is there do we have a minimum amount that or a maximum? What is the policy around trying to contribute to Fund 46?
Yeah, so, no, it's usually been, we have always attempted to build it into the budget. This year, I think we budgeted about $60,000. But obviously, we've been constrained just because of the failed initial operating levy. What we did ask for all of you is that we, as the CDs, we have laddered CDs and cash. Kara and I would like to come back to you to set parameters on how much should be in a high-yield savings account and how much should be fixed into CDs. We are currently getting a much better rate, and we have one last CD with BMO Harris, that when that matures, I think it's late spring, early summer, we will move it over to PMA, so that all your money is with one vendor that's currently also helping you with your other bonds and gives you the best rates, their broker. But we do want to come back to you with a protocol. How much should be fluid cash? How much should be fixed? And then one of the things that Mike Koika and I have talked about is, as it generates interest, is that something that, as he has projects, that we'd always be able to spend the interest that's generated per year. So as an example, we were able to touch Fund 46 for finishing LED lighting at this building. but it was completely repaid by the interest that was earned. And so it was basically cost neutral for the district. And so those are some of the next business rules, I think, as a board, you should be setting up in principle to direct the superintendent and finance.
Yeah, and I just think with all these things that we're talking about moving into Fund 46, we might want to consider how we look at that on a budget perspective and how much we can actually earmark every year. That's responsible, but that doesn't break us. So, all right, great. We're done with the info and discussion. We're on to recognition of visitors. Anyone here care to be recognized? All right, we're going to move on. The board is going to consider a motion to convene into closed session under exemptions 1985 1C for employee 1 support and employee 2 licensed. So we need a motion and a time, and then we can roll call.
I move to reconvene in closed session at 8:10.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Let's just do a roll call. Tanya?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Vicky?
Aye.
Helen?
There you go, aye.
All right, we'll go into closed session at 8:10. Thank you, everyone. Just for clarity, we will adjourn from closed session and back into open and adjourn. There will be no action taken.
You don't know.
We don't know,
Yeah,
okay.
so you have to wait.
Okay, I can't say that then. We don't know if there's gonna be action or not.
We don't know.